Say a very good morning to the head of policy at Reform UK. It'll brighten my Thursday. Zia Yusuf, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Very well.
Try not to rant too much. Where do you want to start? Should we start with Wes Streeting? Independent review, overdiagnosis of mental health. Completely agree. It led me to ask this morning, how many people are playing the game and how many people are being, it's all about labels. And then, of course, this shocking story that A&E's here. 200,000 appointments last Christmas. I've got an ingrowing toenail or I'm having a bad hair day. People need to take responsibility, but politicians and this government need to be stronger, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Look, what we're hearing, the Labour government basically pointing to things that everybody in this country could have told them for years and years. We know A&E has been backed up totally unacceptably. We've been talking about this for quite a long time, actually, Jeremy. We've talked about the fact that 19,000 British people waited more than 3 days in A&E last year alone. That is a shameful figure. One of the key reasons for this, actually, is that there is simply not enough GP capacity. Why is there not enough GP capacity? There's not enough GPs, but also there's been a population explosion. The population has exploded, particularly under the Conservative government. Tens of thousands of new registrants to GP surgeries who are foreign nationals. We already have that data. We talked about that last year, so we know about that. And then in terms of the overdiagnosis problem, well, Richard Tice talked about this, if you remember, at a press conference just a couple of weeks ago, an SEND, and he got inundated with all kinds of abuse. And look, I've spent time in county halls because a lot of the coalface of dealing with SEND challenges is at local council level. I've spent time in reform councils across the country, and I could see, the officers are sitting there. We're looking at numbers where the number of kids who are being diagnosed with special educational needs is compounding at a double-digit growth rate from an already very large number. And each one of those is a big liability for the taxpayer. And as you just alluded to, the people who lose out the most when there is overdiagnosis or there are people gaming the system who actually need help from the system. Why is it that people get so angry if you see someone parking in a disabled parking bay when they don't, when they shouldn't do? It's because there's a deep sense of injustice there. There's a limited supply of those spaces. You can't just turn up and order and just get another one by answering some questions correctly. We do have, frankly, an epidemic of overdiagnosis. It doesn't do anyone any favours. And one of the big problems here, Jeremy, is that the incentive structure now in the country is changing. It's getting to the stage where if you're not gaming the system, and I'm hearing this from parents, it's like, well, I want my son or my daughter to get more time in exams. There are exams, I'm hearing stories where exams are finishing and about a tenth of the kids are leaving at the allotted time and everybody else is staying for extra time because they've got some sort of special educational need. Now, at that point, who's being an irresponsible parent? That's the really sad and worrying situation that we're now in. We've got to get a handle on this. I'll give you another data point I read over the weekend. Most of your listeners may not have seen it, but they were talking about it in America too, where 40%, 40, of undergraduates at Stanford University, one of America's Ivy League elite schools, also have some kind of mental health condition and are getting special, what they call accommodations for this. So we're seeing the same thing there. There's a lot of people there also talking about the incentive structure being completely wrong. We've got to stop people who do not need these special accommodations, who are not truly special educational needs from getting it. We've got to get a handle on this. Otherwise, frankly, the country's going to go bankrupt many times over in the coming years.
And I think, you're right. I've told this story many times, but my now 20-year-old daughter was diagnosed with, at the age of 12, the worst dyslexia. And when I say this, I've said this to her face, so everybody should have a sense of humour. Her name's Ava, and she was that bad she couldn't spell her name, and it's the same backwards as it is forward. She got help financed by me, and that girl ended up with 8 GCSEs, 3 A-levels. She went to York University and she's working. She never sat and went, I'm not going to do it, but she saw other people being given the same benefits, but she needed them. We have to care about the genuine people, Zia, but we have to have this unfortunately hard conversation for many that fairness should run straight down the middle. Let me bring you to the other thing, which I know you're absolutely raging about, so am I. Labour overnight confirming, or they will this morning, that next year's mayoral elections in 4 boroughs will be postponed 4 years. Essex, Hampshire and Solent, Sussex and Brighton, Norfolk and Suffolk. Labour says we need to sort of organise things. Yourself, Conservatives saying you're delaying the inevitable, and more than that, Zia Yusuf, are they not denying the British people their democratic right in what is blatantly political posturing because they're scared of losing? Are they not?
That's exactly what he's doing. Starmer's acting like a dictator. And can we imagine what would happen if Nigel Farage won a general election? One of the first things he did was cancel elections for millions of people, start withdrawing jury trials, starting to try to impose digital ID. Can you imagine what we would hear from the mainstream media and from the institutions, for example? This is an absolutely flagrant political decision to deny millions of people the vote. I mean, people are talking about it as boroughs and things. I want to be crystal clear. This is 10% of the British population that is affected. These are huge, newly created areas. 10% of the British population. Over 7 million people live in those affected areas. That's on top of, we had 5 million people affected last year. You know, you mentioned the Tories criticising this one. Remember, it was the Tories who colluded with Labour to cancel last year's ones. That the Tories would have lost a hell of a lot more council seats if they had, if we had run all of the elections that were meant to happen. I will say this to Reform voters and Reform-inclined people who are listening, is that Keir Starmer is merely delaying the inevitable. They're trying to keep at bay this turquoise tidal wave that has been sweeping the country now for some time. What he's not going to be able to do is prevent it ultimately from crashing down on them twice as hard. I think people are absolutely furious about this. They're spitting with anger, and I think that's absolutely right. And by the way, we speak to people from around the world who see all of this stuff, and that they genuinely are flabbergasted. They say, "Don't you have some constitutional protection?
Well, listen to this.
You're going to try and cancel the general election." And I'm afraid to say, you know, this is also the Labour government. This is not in isolation. We've got millions of people being robbed of their democratic right to vote. We've got digital ID now being imposed. That was not in the manifesto. We've got jury trials, the right to jury trials, which has been enshrined since Magna Carta for hundreds of years. That's being withdrawn. We've got the Attorney General, Starmer's Attorney General, that he appointed, launching deeply political and personal attacks against his primary political rival. So we've got a whole host of things that, frankly, look deeply authoritarian. And I'm afraid we've all got to make our voices crystal clear that we view it as totally unacceptable, and make sure that the Uni Party is punished at the ballot box at the next given opportunity.
You'll love this. This is whilst you've been speaking, Zia. Jez, tell Zia, a friend who was twice the local mayor of Chorley, who defected and is due to stand for reform, last night attended a council meeting where they voted to cancel the local election in May. It's the constituency of the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. He put total commie takeover. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting.
It is. Yeah, that is very interesting.
That they just don't want to know. I'll bring you on to the other thing. I completely agree with you on that. I mean, that has caused outrage, this even more so. You will obviously have heard, as will the viewers and listeners, of what's happening in East Crowborough. Crowborough, a little village in East Sussex. It came to prominence a few weeks ago that the government planned to take 600 small boat migrants, in brackets illegals, in brackets asylum seekers, close brackets, and put them in this army training camp. Overnight, there were protests, and the community was saying, well, what about safety issues? And all the do-gooders went, that's a bit unfair. But people were saying, I'm concerned about my families. Quite right. Overnight, and this is unbelievable, Ministry of Defence chiefs have ordered teenage cadets, who, by the way, Zira, have trained there 80 years since the end of the Second World War, to leave the training camp within hours to make way for the migrants. And the reason they have given the cadets is it's not going to be safe for them because of the migrants in Crowborough and East Sussex, which begs the single question. So fighting men who are trained are in danger. What about the British public then? Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, every now and again, you see the mask slip, and you hear what the government really thinks about this situation. That is incredibly shocking. It's exactly right. You know, why should little girls be forced to go to schools nearby, these sorts of facilities, when, yeah, exactly as you said, cadets, military cadets, it is deemed unsafe for them. It's not dissimilar to, do you remember when the court case for the Epping
Yeah.
the Epping migrant hotel was going on, and lawyers for the Home Office making the case for why the government should be able to continue to house illegal migrants there, said explicitly, they made the explicit legal argument that yes, the rights of the illegal migrants do take precedence over the rights of local residents. They said it clear as day inside the courtroom. And so, that is where we currently are. We've been saying this for some time. Forget about British people first with the Uni Party. It's been British people last. The British people are literally the last possible people that Labour or the Tories have considered when making these appalling policies. And so there's a very simple answer to how we deal with this. We have to detain illegal migrants. We have to deport them, and that will ensure they stop coming. And that also means the north of a million people who are here illegally also have to leave. We have to uphold immigration law. This country is now viewed as a joke. That's why people come here from France. The reason they come here from France, and again, I want to emphasize that, they're coming here from France, a country that lots of British people go to on holiday every year, because we're a soft touch, because we roll out the red carpet, because they get free accommodation, they get free taxis, free meals, free days out. I mean, we've covered this. I've been on your show talking about the, frankly, monstrously inappropriate things that British taxpayers are forced to pay for these people. And it's time we finally put British people first. We've had enough of it. And I'm afraid the only way we're actually going to see an end to this, because the last thing I'll say about this is you'll hear a lot from Labour, them talking about, oh, we're going to close all the hotels. They'll close hotels because they're dispersing them into houses of multiple occupancy. And now we have further evidence, by the way, that now what they're doing is literally just giving them taxpayer cash and saying, go and find some friends to stay with, and offering
listen, we've talked privately, we've talked on air. I find it astonishing that a raft of politicians, elected officials, the blob, whatever, are so seemingly prepared to continue to take the British public for fools. I know all the people that jump up and down and they say, oh, this right and this right, but they forget, and you put it there, the British people. And it is neither far right nor racist nor anything other than full of common sense to say, if you don't concentrate on the very people who are providing the money that's paying for all of this, something will give. And I find the attitude of so many politicians. When Nigel, I watched him the other day, tried to stand up and speak about this, they're booing and hissing and waving and shouting. And I'm looking at them on screens here and I'm thinking, you're all going to lose your seats, you idiots. You're not listening to the mood of the country. Let me just throw one thing at you before you go. I remember the party conference talking to Nigel and saying they'll come for you now, the establishment. There's a story overnight in the Telegraph that a hotel, I was due to be here, cancels the Reform UK Christmas party. Is that true?
Yeah, well, there's been multiple venues that we've had multiple issues like this. And look, to be fair, even on the venues, what is happening is they are just being inundated with threats. And so we have to ask ourselves how we've arrived in this situation where a party that is not just a mainstream party, but a party, frankly, dominating in opinion polls, has events. Not universally, I want to be crystal clear. We have lots of events. I was up at a brilliant one in Durham a couple of nights ago at an old working man's club. So we do have lots of great events around the country, but it only ever seems to happen to Reform, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to happen to any other party. And if we allow, again, going back to this sense of authoritarianism that is pervasive now inside this Labour government, if we allow ourselves to be intimidated, and we're in a situation where the party leading in national opinion polls is having events cancelled because event organisers are basically fearful to run the event because they're being hit by online mobs. We have to ask ourselves what is going wrong, and we would implore such venues to do the right thing, because in the end, Reform is supported by a third of the country already. It's looking like it's certainly a high possibility that Reform could form the next government, and for millions of people around the country, Reform is a source of hope for them. So we would urge them to do the right thing and allow these events to go ahead.
And it comes back to that whole establishment thing, people sending threats. You're disrespecting the millions of people who believe in this, and you're disrespecting, the basic political process. Great to have you on, my friend. The fight continues. Thank you so much indeed. Yusuf, Head of Policy at Reform UK. Graham in